Right. Well, it is 12:02, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mary, and I am with Fairygodboss, and we are so excited to be joined by our friends at Prudential for today's conversation. A few housekeeping things. We will have time at the end for questions, so please use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen to make sure we see your questions. We will try to get to as many as possible. Today's conversation is being recorded and we plan on sharing it with all registrants via email. And again, thank you all for joining us. Like I said, we're joined by our friends at Prudential today. And for those of you who don't know, Prudential is the world's largest financial services company. So I want to turn it over to our panelists and let's start with some introductions. Would love to know your name, what you do at Prudential, and what is your Prudential financial story and how did you get into this line of work? Marcia, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you so much. So yes, my name is Marcia Dukes. I am a diversity practitioner here at Prudential. I've been here 15 years and my journey to this company and this industry is all about a network. So it started because Prudential actually was a client. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and we service Prudential's pharmacy benefit as a pharmacy benefit manager. And we basically made a network with Prudential to service them as a client. And the person that reported to me actually left the pharmaceutical company, came to Prudential, and then started calling me saying, Marcia, you need to come over. And I kept saying, you know what? Absolutely not. I'm fine. I'm content where I am. But that didn't stop him. He kept calling me every week till I did actually just said, okay, you know what? Here's my resume. Let me apply and let me see what it's all about. I have to tell you, it was one of the best decisions for me. I was able to come into a company that really had a lot of diversity as far as learning and experiencing different roles. So the person that actually brought me in is also still with the company. And we've been on this journey now for over 20 years. So that's my journey into Prudential.
I love that. Persistence, key. Courtney, what about you?
So I am Courtney Johnson, Vice President for National Accounts for the Client Relationship Management Team in Group Insurance Distribution. So almost a similar story to Marcia, except for I am at the beginning stages of that. I've only been at Prudential for going on 3 years, actually 3 years next month. But very similar in that I've been in the insurance world for quite some time. I don't tell about how long because that ages me. But someone was telling me just all about how great Prudential was and all of the wonderful things that they offer for their employees and associates. And I wasn't really exactly looking for a job at the time, but they kept telling me over and over again about how great it was that they worked here and how great it was that they worked here. And so then I was like, you know what? Okay, let me just see. And so here I am. That person is still here today as well. So still on the journey with them too. So
great. And last but not least, Cindy.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me today, Mary. So my story is very similar. I'm a vice president today in the Enabling Solutions Department, and I oversee our complaints. So my story is I have been here over 30 years. But I've been able to make a significant career for myself here at Prudential. So I started right out of college, only a year behind my college experience. So I was really looking for a company with good benefits as well as a college tuition reimbursement program because that was important to me at the time. So over the years, I've had over 12 different roles in many different departments. I've had so many different projects I've been a part of. So I've been really able to expand my career just, over the years. And today, I'm happy to say a year ago, I was promoted to this vice president role. So I originally started in the individual life insurance business. We were paying the life insurance claims, beneficiary claims. So, realizing, how important life insurance is to our consumers. And, it kind of met my purpose on paying it forward as well as helping people. So I'm here 30 years and very proud to say that. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and congrats on your newish role, about a year in. So you all have experienced great success in financial services. In an industry study conducted by Deloitte, it was found that women account for just under 22% of leadership roles in financial services. Given the sector's gender gap, we'd love to know how each of you reached your level of success. Courtney, do you want to start?
Yes, I can start. So I'll say one of the things that has helped me along the way is creating a network, just as Marcia talked about, even both of us talking about how we got here, but keeping that network and creating a circle of friends. I have what I call a sister circle, and that sister circle helps me in just level setting, helps me with brainstorming and thinking through ideas and just talking through things that we're all going through. So I think for me, not going it alone has definitely been very helpful. I say the second thing that has helped me along the way that is different probably for a lot of people that they don't always do, and women have a tendency also to not do that much, is to self-promote. I take quite a bit of time making sure that when I'm doing something and I've done something, then I've accomplished it and I feel I'm successful at it, that I continue to share that story. And I'm strategic about when I do share that story and who I do share that story with. I share it, of course, first with my network and then also outside of my network as well, because I want people to know just how seriously I take my own career and what I do in order to make sure that I'm diligent about making sure I'm furthering my career. So self-promotion and continuing to have a great network and circle of friends and sisters is something that has helped me to be successful.
I love that. I love, your sister circle. You should trademark that. And Cindy, you just shared that you were promoted within the last year, so would love to hear from you as well.
Sure. So my career has been, what I have found is I've taken jobs that were lateral jobs. I've also posted for other positions. But along the way, I have to be very honest and say that I've had leaders who have pushed me. They have sponsored me. They have been advocates for me. I've had mentors that have helped me with the confidence gap, because I did struggle with that early on. And it took really good, people in my relationships with others along the way. And when the opportunities came up for training, attending leadership programs, I always raised my hand and I always wanted to learn, because continuous learning is all about the journey here. So for me, because I didn't have a college degree initially, like getting and furthering my education was also very important to me. So I was able to do that while working at Prudential. And again, with the support of my bosses, my leadership team, I would say one of the key factors and the turning points in my career, going from a very junior level to a more senior level was really the sponsorship that I had from the senior leaders. I took on a role being an affinity women's group leader. I didn't know what I was doing. I was fresh out of a women's leadership program, and I was approached to see if I would lead this women's life experience group for our local site in Pennsylvania. And, I guess having the courage to take that on was, I guess, something that I felt like I could really do, and it was really meaningful work to me. So it was extremely pivotal in my career, because what ended up happening is I led the site program, and then I also was nominated to be the national lead for Prudential. It was an old program that we had. We've now retired that, and we have a bigger program. But what happened during that time is these other leaders started taking notice of me. And I didn't do it for the promotion. It was like extra on the side of my job. I just did it because it was the right thing to do. And I wanted to meet other people, and I wanted to further and pay it forward my experience. So take on those extra assignments, even though sometimes you might not feel like you have the bandwidth to do that, you probably do. And if it's important to you, you probably will.
I love that. And I love your focus on sponsors. It's so important. And Marcia, would love to hear from you as well about how you've gotten into leadership and your level of success.
Absolutely. So for me, I think I'm going to make 2 points. One that's similar to Cindy's as well, but it was really around being able to take risk. I, at one point in my career, early junior, very structured, knew that I had to have a plan for everything. Autonomy was not my friend. It was like, you know what? I need to know exactly what I want to do and need to do. And so actually going into a leadership development program that Prudential had allowed me to take those risks that I was afraid of taking previously. And that provided me with some real learning of myself first, right? It gave us both, to Cindy's point, it gave me mentorship, it gave us sponsorship. But what it didn't give us was a roadmap to say, at the end of this 3-year journey, you will have a job. It basically said, you have to find a job. And so that at first was extremely scary for me because I didn't know what would happen. But going through the program taught me so much about how to build more relationships, how to network, how to basically, to the point that was made earlier, toot your own horn without seeing like, being self-centered sort of. So that helped. And then as well, I would like to plug a business resource group, right? So in Prudential, we have 8 different business resource groups, and it allows you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You can do things that you don't do in your job every day, and it allows you to take some additional risks that you may have been afraid of. There's this whole theory for women about the imposter syndrome, where you feel like I'm not capable, I can't do this job. But when you have the support of a business resource group, it allows you to get the support you need. And if you fail, nobody necessarily knows the failure. And so they help support you through those failures and learning. And it allows you to, again, grow and build out your career. So I've utilized both of those, a development program and our business resource groups, to really help me lean in into some of the skill sets that I needed to really hone in on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, those resources are so critical to helping advance your career. And I like what you said, the ability to take risks. And if you fail, it's really more of a growth opportunity than anything, which is how I think we should all view our quote unquote failures, right? So you all touched on this a little bit. And we just referenced the sector's gender gap. But what do y'all think are some of the most significant barriers of being a woman in leadership? And what advice would you give to overcome it? Cindy, let's start with you.
Sure. Great question. So I think for me, it's always been about like self-limiting thoughts, a mindset that, maybe you can't do it, right? Some women have ideas and experiences that, you're supposed to be a certain way, or you look to other mentors and you want to be like that person. Or, I would just say, sharing, your thoughts and your ideas is really important. When I was younger, coming up the business, I was really quiet, but I had a lot of thoughts in my head. And so I really wanted to be that confident leader. And I did look to role models that were confident. So I would say, stop with that self-limiting belief that you can't do something, because you probably can. And know your value.
Great advice. Marcia, what about you?
So similar, not only know your value, but be confident into sharing with others what your value is. For me, I struggled with that. I have to tell you, I couldn't do that. Like, I always felt like I'm not sure that I'm bringing what I need to bring to the table. And I had to actually do a lot of self-reflection, meeting with what Courtney called her sister circles, but I kind of frame as a board of directors, and saying, what do you see in me? Like, what do you see that I bring to the table? And I think having that validation from others helped me at least get the validation for myself. Because earlier in my career, again, I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. and was probably overdoing, right? Like that perfectionism, needed everything to be a certain way. And so I had to kind of leave some of that baggage at the table. And I think the most important thing for most people is find out who you are, find out what your value system is, find out what your beliefs are. Previously in my career, I would probably leave a job every 5 years, and it was something I was searching for. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And a lot of what I was able to figure out with Prudential is that my value system aligns with their value system. And that was important for me. So I'm continuing, my journey in my career with aligned perspectives.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love your board of directors. Sometimes it's so much easier to have a third party give you that belief or see things in you that you just don't see yourself. So that's so important. Thank you for sharing. And Courtney, would love to hear from you too. What's your advice about overcoming barriers?
So similar to both what Cindy and Marcia have mentioned. But Marcia, you mentioned earlier the imposter syndrome, and kind of to Cindy's point of that, having those self-doubts and those self-thoughts that aren't the most positive. So for me, it's also knowing your voice. So knowing your value and then knowing your voice and being able to use your voice when you're at that seat at the table. I think one of the best things I've ever heard is that you're at the table for a reason. So don't be afraid to speak up and to say whatever it is on your mind. I think early in my career, I was definitely one of those individuals that had a lot of thoughts too. And then I would come out of the meeting afterwards and say, I really thought this would be a good idea. And I would approach it and say, hey, when we were talking about this, I really wanted to say this. And now knowing my voice to say, no, I'm going to say what it is I want to say today during this meeting, during this call. And then we can talk about it, the details kind of, later. But knowing my voice is definitely something that I think everyone, if you do that self-reflection, know your value, and then really know your voice, it'll help you kind of get past those barriers.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit. I think so many folks are looking for balance in their life, right? So I'd love for you all to share with our participants about how you find work-life balance, or really, as I like to call it, work-life integration. Marcia, I see you shaking your head and saying yes. So let's start with you.
Absolutely. It is work-life integration. I've figured out balance does not work. And I think before, looking at balance, I was putting way too much pressure on myself because I was like, I'm not balancing everything. And, again, someone shared with me, it's not about the balance, it's how you're integrating. And so, it was really determining things that I could no longer support. So like in my household, I don't have the normal responsibilities of cooking. Like I just can't. I don't have the time. If you wait for me to cook a meal, it's going to be 10 o'clock at night. So, between my husband and I, we've made that work where he can start dinner, he gets in earlier, and so he can take care of that for me. But at one point, I think I felt like I was on overload because I was saying I had to do everything. It's almost like that superwoman effect. Like you had to take care of everything. I don't remember if you remember, like I can bring home the bacon. And it was like this commercial from years ago. And it was about a woman being responsible for everything in the household. And so I think one thing that you have to do is, first of all, don't hold yourself accountable and be guilty. I try to always look at for my children, it's not about the, quantity of time, it's about the quality of time. So I've put those kind of positions in my life to at least make myself and my family know what's happening and help me guide through this integration of work and life. And especially now during COVID, because there are no boundaries.
Absolutely. I love that. And the teamwork that you mentioned between you and your partner is it's so needed to really achieve that integration, because I totally agree. Balance is somewhat mythical, I think. Courtney, what about you?
I definitely think that balance is definitely mythical, but integration. And for me, one of the things that I have to integrate, and I found that it has made me a better leader, is to acknowledge that I need to work out. Like I need that time to exercise, and I need that time to take that time for me. And even in sharing that kind of with my team, I find that they're open more to sharing, hey, we're going to take a break, or hey, I'm going to take, a walk, especially during COVID. We all need to get outside as much as we possibly can. So for me, I have to integrate some sort of exercise and time for me in there as much as I can during the day. And I used to feel really guilty about it. I used to feel really bad about saying, hey guys, instead of for lunch, I'm going to go boxing. And they'd be like, I felt really guilty, but now I realize, no, I need that for me, and it'll help me be a better associate when I come back, that I'll have a clear mind. So that's integrated into my work-life balance.
I love that. And it's so true. You need to take care of yourself to be your absolute possible best in all aspects of your life. And love that you would take lunch breaks and go boxing. That sounds super fun. Cindy, what about you?
Well, I feel like we're all the same person, because I definitely enjoy the walking, the exercise too, Courtney. I think it's really important. And, one of the things that we all do have in common here is that, we work for such an amazing company that allows us that flexibility, especially during these times of COVID, right? I know we're all, working remotely and, trying to find that right work-life integration. And it hasn't always been easy for me. It's, and I'm sure it's hard for a lot of you out there to know where that balance is, right? Like when to shut it off, because many of you might be working from home and you just don't know when the end of the day comes. And I know for a lot of last year, with a lot of, long days, and, I ended up needing to do more walks and more stretching and more yoga. I mean, yesterday we had a yoga practice for 15 minutes at lunch during work. So the company is really taking our mental health very seriously, and they want us to practice that work-life integration. So very proud of our leaders. But for me, I growing up in this business, I did raise my family, and they're all grown now. So right now it's my husband and I, empty nesters in this house. But at the end of the day, you still have to work on your relationships at home and at work. So one of those things is, I always try to find that right balance. And sometimes it's all about having boundaries and knowing, when to shut it off, and making sure that you're taking time for yourself and for your family.
Absolutely. And love that you had a 15-minute yoga break at lunch. That's a good practice. And I think we've all found ourselves having to go on more walks, stretch more, kind of break up the routine, since, so many of us have been at home for the past several months. I do want to remind participants, if you have questions, we will have time at the end. Please use the Q&A function. So feel free to drop them as they come to you. And you also have the option to ask them anonymously. So switching gears a little bit as well, we mentioned at the top that, there was a Deloitte study that found there's just under 22% of leadership roles are women in financial services. So with that, would love to open this up to see if any of you have ever experienced gender bias in your career. And if so, how have you handled it? Courtney, would love to start with you.
So yes, so I work in, the insurance industry and work with mostly men, and I work closely and align very closely and have for all of my career with the sales organization. And sometimes the sales organization is very heavily male dominated. And I will never forget, I had a sales partner that once told me, you should watch more sports so that you could share more sports stories and share more sports examples so that we could all carry on and have more relevant conversation if you watch sports more. And I originally was very taken back, and I was like, well, I do watch sports, and I was a cheerleader in high school. And then I said, you know what, I do want to try to see a way to do this differently. And then I realized, no, that's not necessarily me. Do I watch sports? Yes. But do I really want that to be the focal of conversation? No. I wanted the conversation to be more about my knowledge and to be more about my experiences and what kind of had got me to that position and seat at the table. And so I found a way to kind of change the conversation and change the dialogue so that it would center back to work. And I found sometimes I would use humor. Sometimes I do as an off-put humor to get the conversation back to where I needed to be. But I didn't have to go the route of talking sports in order to get it to work.
That's a great tactic and really great advice. Change the conversation. It's like the communications adage, answer the question you wish you were asked. So I love that tactic. Marcia, what about you? Do you have any experiences you'd like to share?
Yes, so similar with Courtney, again, male dominated field. And I think it was more around the roles, right? So, we have male roles and female roles. People think that we have these roles, right? And in my situation, it was, every time we went to a meeting, it was almost assumed that I should take the notes as the woman in the room. And so, at first you're doing it and you're thinking, oh, I'm just being helpful. And then you're looking around and you're seeing most of the male, and they're not doing any note taking and they're not publishing any of the after meeting notes. And so it really was about having a conversation on setting expectations, right? And I had shared to you the BRGs. And again, our BRGs have a really good way of giving us tools and techniques. And they had shared this framework called SBI, Situation, Behavior, and Impact. And I literally just, had a conversation with my colleagues, explain what I was feeling, utilizing that framework. And it changed. It really changed the dynamics that they could see it. And sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. I think it was an automatic assumption. And once they were able to see what they were doing, we were able to actually, make a more equitable meeting attendance and note taking and things like that. So.
Great advice, and definitely one of those things that I feel like have probably happened to a lot of women throughout their careers, the note taking. And Cindy, what about you? Any experiences you'd like to share with the group?
Yes. So I was a leader of people for many years in my career. I led teams for a long time. And this particular period, I was leading a group and things were going okay, but in a conversation, found myself in a conversation of receiving some feedback that some of my skills were, too mothering or too empathetic. So I was like, wow, I really had to reflect on that. And I took that information back and I internalized it a little bit and just trying to figure out, is there some truth in that? Do I need to change? And after some time thinking about it and then having a conversation with myself and others just to really see if I was showing up that way, right? Because it's really a good skill to be empathetic. And as you read all the research today, I mean, we're going back 10 years ago that I received this feedback. So, you're reading all the research today and it's like empathetic traits are good leadership qualities. So I was really grateful for the feedback because it did get me to look at my skills and did I need to adjust a little bit? And I did. I made some adjustments, but being empathetic is something that I will never apologize for, and I could probably never change about myself.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your self-reflection and tweaking where you felt appropriate, but owning your leadership style is so important. Thank you all for sharing your personal experiences with us around gender bias. And we all have a variety of personal experiences, that influence our thinking, both in our personal lives and in our work lives. And so I would love to open up, if you're willing to share some of your personal experiences that have influenced your thinking around diversity and inclusion. Cindy, let's start with you.
Sure, let me get off mute here. Yeah, like I said earlier in my career, I was very quiet. And I had many thoughts, many ideas, many suggestions, but my fear of rejection kept me from speaking up. So as I explained earlier, I had attended a lot of leadership programs. I finished my college education during, the years at Prudential. And, I was able to come out of my shell and really speak up, as so much so that I was even a communication, in my college, I majored in communication as well as leadership. So I always knew I had it in me. I just needed to find that voice. I think it was mentioned earlier, Courtney or Marcia. And once I did that, like my career took off, and I still struggle sometimes today, like even coming today, like it's a lot to work up to public speak. And it's not as easy as it looks. I've been told I'm a natural. I'm not really sure if that's true, but I definitely like to be authentic. And this experience, and I take on these types of experiences just to challenge myself, because that's part of my personality. And, if that's you, if you're quiet and you want to speak up, and maybe you're an introvert, maybe I'm an extrovert, and I'm still considered quiet for an extrovert, but I've worked my way through this process. And today I'm, receiving, promotions. I'm getting, really good confidence in myself. And, I want to just pay it forward to all of you today.
I love that. And for what it's worth, I do think you are a natural. Marcia, what about you?
So yes, I would say from a diversity and inclusion perspective, again, I think it's the power that Prudential has allowed their employees to have. When I joined the company, it was about advocacy and honestly, community advocacy. And Prudential was very good at saying, if something is not working in your community, you need to speak up about it. So I found my voice, to Cindy's point, actually in my community first. And I started advocating for education and making sure there was equity in my town for education, and came back to Prudential and start sharing my personal experience with what I was doing for the children in our community. And people took notice, like, she's really advocating. And so that advocacy really just stretched me in my community, and then stretched me personally as I showed up to Prudential. And again, they have so many good programs that actually allowed us to implement different things within our communities. So you could actually volunteer, actually get paid for the volunteer, get things implemented in your local community schools. So all of those things helped me, again, define who I was as a person, and then allowed me to do that same kind of advocacy within Prudential to make sure that people had equitable treatment. And that's where I am today.
I love that.
And to be honest too, it really started because my daughter had a learning disability. And I started advocating not only for her, but for the children in my community.
That's incredible. I love that impact. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Courtney, do you have anything you'd like to add as well?
Yes, I definitely will echo both what Cindy and Marcia said in regards to just Prudential's foundation for the business resource groups. I will say that the business resource groups that I've experienced allow you to have and be able to share your authentic selves more than ever. So you can share your authentic self in those BRG groups, and then you can also share them at work and personally. So Marcia, like you shared your fight and your passion and desire for things in the community, then I was able to kind of share some of those same things from me personally at work, but with the foundation of the BRG groups that Prudential has. It's been great to kind of share and to be able to share my personal experiences outside of work, inside of work, and those BRGs supporting those conversations. So from a diversity and inclusion perspective, just being able to have that diverse school of thought inside work and outside of work has been really helpful.
Amazing. So Marcia, you just talked a little bit about advocacy. Courtney, you just were touching on BRGs, and that's been a common theme throughout this conversation. And so would love to hear from each of you if you could share what's really motivated you to get involved in being an advocate for change. And more importantly, how can you engage sponsors and allies to go with you on that change journey? Marcia, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that has really stood out for me is making a difference, right? Everybody thinks they have to do a tremendous amount of work in order to really make impact and make a difference. And what I found is by advocating, you don't. What I find is if you're advocating for the right reasons, people will join you. People will support you. And again, BRGs, to Courtney's point earlier, that's what that is. You can come to that group and say, hey, here's something that I'm seeing. A prime example was this whole confidence gap that we've been talking about. We saw that as an issue for women. And my colleague and I said, you know what, we want to develop a program. And our BRG supported us. We went out, we found a resource, we developed a program, and we had like an annual event that we actually implemented that program to help others. And so as long as you know that you can, again, get the support that you need and to do something to what I call the good work and to make a difference, then, you know, that's the motivation for me. And it continues. The journey never stops.
That's awesome. I love that. And you're so right. It doesn't have to be some huge thing. It can be small actions every day that really influence change. Cindy, what about you?
Yeah, for me, you know, just motivating me for being an advocate of change is really just paying it forward. I mean, I've had a very wonderful career here. I've been able to raise a family. I've been able to, you know, go back to school. I've been able to, you know, actually really overcome some very, you know, significant stressful events in my life, and all because that I had the support of family and friends and a work environment that supported this growth journey that I'm on. So when I took the assignment to lead the business affinity group at Prudential for Women's Life Experience, you know, my motivation was all about paying it forward and trying to help other women and men, you know, succeed in this world, whether it be in their personal lives. You know, I could offer support, or be at work, you know, being that quiet person, you know, trying to get other people to speak up, speak their mind, take on project management roles when they've never done that as part of their jobs, and really seeing people, you know, their confidence are up and just being motivated again, and having something additional to look forward to. You come to work every day, but then you have this project that you might be working on that you're going to be introducing one of the presidents of our companies. I mean, we did that. I mean, we helped people grow and develop in their roles, and not necessarily in their jobs, but in their soft skills. So that was just amazing to me. It was just something that I really felt passionate about, and I wanted to see and push that forward.
That's awesome. And Courtney, what about you?
Something that drives me and motivates me for being an advocate for change is definitely getting an opportunity to give back and to see people kind of overcome that confidence and to instill confidence in others, just as others have poured into me. We talked earlier about sponsors and allies, and those sponsors and allies can pour confidence into you. So I think you then should in turn become a sponsor and ally to somebody else to pour confidence back into them. And that's something that it continues to motivate me and inspire me each and every single day. I love and great to hear when I'm talking with an associate and they say, you know what, you gave me the confidence to go for this and to try this and to do this. That's what motivates me.
Love that. I do want to let everyone know we will be moving on to audience Q&A soon. We're already getting some great questions, so please drop them in the Q&A function whenever you have a moment. So we've touched on the pandemic a little bit, particularly when we were discussing work-life integration. And we've all seen the reports that women's careers have been really adversely impacted by the pandemic. So I'd love to open it up to each of you about what advice do you have for women who may be contemplating leaving the workforce as a result of the pandemic? Courtney, let's start with you.
I'd say, remembering that your voice can be your voice inside of work and outside of work. And if you decide, you want to do something different, and that's leaving the workforce, then I think, go for it. Don't be afraid to go for it just because of circumstances that might be out of your control. I think finding your voice outside of work is just as important as inside of work. So if you want to go and do something different, I say do that. Now is definitely the time to be bold and to be fast and to do that. So I encourage, if you have other opportunities to explore, to do it.
Love that. Be bold. That's, I think, advice and words of encouragement we could all use. Marcia, any advice for you have for others?
Yeah, I do. So, it's funny because during COVID, this conversation came up a lot with women that had children, and they were trying to, work, manage the kids on Zoom calls, homework, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all those things, right? And so I think for me, it was just actually talking to people. What I was finding is I was hiding it, right? Like I was stressed out, I was hiding, and I wasn't really sharing. And then a colleague opened up to me and was like, you know what? I'm struggling here. Here's what's happening. And then I think together we were able to talk through some things. I had to let some things go. And I think that was hard for me. But talking to this colleague at least gave me the insights. And so if you're not raising your hand, asking for help, asking for support, maybe brainstorming with other people that may be in your same position, I would encourage everybody to do that now, because it does take a village, I believe. And so, women supporting women is something that I always think is critical, and don't do it alone, get the support you need.
Already two great pieces of advice that I will take away with me. Be bold, ask for help. And Cindy, what about you? What's your advice?
I love that. Be bold and ask for help, because that's so relevant today. I love that phrase, being bold. It's something that, I keep close to me too. So thanks for sharing that, Courtney. I would say, sit and reflect with, why things are hard. I don't make any rash decisions, because we all have bad days and sometimes we have bad weeks, and that's okay. And sometimes you're tired, and when you feel tired, you should rest. Even if it's a 10-minute rest, I just recently heard, a 10-minute cat nap or a 10-minute yoga session or a 10-minute mindfulness session does the world good. So I would say, try not to hold yourself to a standard of perfection, and strive for excellence, because perfection is not attainable. And, I started using that a lot in coaching sessions, because I do hear that quite a bit. And people don't actually say they want to be perfect, but when they talk, I hear the perfectionism coming out of what they're talking about. So make sure that you're not holding yourself to a standard of perfection, because it's just not obtainable.
Oh, I love this. And the chat, people are definitely agreeing with all three of you. So true. Great advice. So thank you for sharing that. I want to switch over to audience Q&A. So Courtney, you talked earlier about your sister circle, which I just love. So for participants who are looking to cultivate that kind of network, what advice do you have for them?
I think it's something that we've kind of all talked about, is finding some people or individuals that will give you honest feedback. And sometimes that's not always your closest friends. Sometimes you do need to branch out and say, hey, I want you to be included in this conversation because I value your honest feedback. And sometimes that feedback can be kind of harsh. I tell people all the time, feedback is a gift. And what you do with that gift is up to you, but it's a gift that you cannot return. So you've got to take that gift and make some changes based upon it. And my sister circle has no problems telling me kind of the harsh and true reality of things and how they land. And that's important. I need to hear that, and I need to know that feedback. So get a group of individuals that will give you honest and raw good feedback.
I love that. Cindy or Marcia, anything else you'd like to add about finding those folks who can give you that feedback and support you?
Yeah, one thing I would add is, as Courtney was talking about, there's an exercise that I did that actually allowed you to make a list of all the people that you have in your network and you kind of categorize them and you put them in buckets. And so that's a good way to identify. I know I've done mine, and I found that I didn't have enough men on that list to kind of actually give me insights. I was gravitating towards women. So I would say that as you're looking at that, making sure that you're being, really strategic in how you're identifying those circles, because they don't have to all be women sometimes too.
I'd like to piggyback. I'd say one of the individuals in my circle is not a sister. So while I term it a sister circle, there is one that's not a sister.
Courtney, this is Cindy. I want to be in your sister circle.
Definitely come on over.
I love that.
I know, and I love all the great advice. And I would just say, just going to quick add, manage your relationships too, right? So be 50% of the equation, and make sure you're managing your network and your relationships and learning new skills, because it's going to come in handy down the road. The reskilling, the learning of new skills. Prudential has a wonderful program out there, Skills Accelerator, where we're encouraging our associates and our team members to take additional classes and really improve upon their skills, because it's important. And relationship skills is also important. So very nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great segue into one of our audience questions. We've talked about so much overcoming imposter syndrome, closing that confidence gap. And a lot of these conversations really tie back to your growth as a leader. And so one of our participants would love to know, do you have any resources you recommend to keep that growth? Any favorite books, podcasts, etc.?
So for me, I had to do self-reflection. And some companies sponsor you to get a Myers-Briggs, but that was extremely helpful for me, because it really identified how I showed up in the things that I am good at and the things that I need to work on. And so I just literally look at what those things are and try to close those gaps. As Cindy said, we can take courses, classes. There's so much learning out there now that it's easy to upskill. But really know who you are as a person is the best advice I can give anybody.
I love that.
I'd say Courtney, a book that I reference quite frequently is The First 90 Days. And while that book sounds like it's only about the first 90 days, it's also a good reminder in approaching things like it is the first 90 days, and new projects, new adventures, new ideas. It helps you to kind of think through, what you're going to do from a research and analysis, from setting trust to whoever you're working with. So I reference that book quite a bit. And there's an easy guide online too now for it. So The First 90 Days is a book I go to quite frequently.
Love that. I'm going to look that up. Thank you for sharing. And Cindy, what about you? Any resources that are your go-tos?
I do listen to a lot of podcasts on self-reflection. I do work on my leadership skills every day. I read a lot of small, short articles out of LinkedIn. And, it's just those little nuggets of information. I'm an avid note taker, so I'm always looking back at my notes, and attending as many leadership classes that I can.
Love that. So a few participants have asked, if you have any advice on someone who's looking to break into a career in the financial services industry, what are some of your tips on how they could stand out, etc.? Marcia, let's start with you.
So the first thing I would say is understanding your transferable skills. It's really not necessarily our industry. There's probably a job out there. I think a lot of people think it's financial service industry. We have communication jobs, marketing, technology. So looking at your skill sets and identifying where you can show up, and then look on our job posting board, because there's so much out there. And we're not a boring insurance company. I just want to pull that out there. Hopefully you could tell by us that it's not boring.
Yeah, I would say y'all are anything but boring. Courtney, what about you? Any advice for folks who want to break into financial services?
I'd say similar to Cindy, how she talked about kind of starting out from the beginning. I started as a claims examiner and worked my way through the entire insurance industry just to see the different types of jobs. I think I've had over maybe 10 different jobs in the insurance industry. So Marcia, you're right. There's definitely more than just one type of insurance person out there. So definitely look and see what something that might be interesting to you, and then reach out to someone in network that works at that company to say, hey, tell me a little bit more about this job. It's going to be probably interesting and surprising that it might not be exactly what you think.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I always recommend folks, like, don't underestimate the power of an informational interview, for sure. And Cindy, any advice for you?
I would say, if you see a job on the posting board, even though you might think or you may not want that job initially, if it meets your skills. Remember, I think there's studies out there that women feel like they have to meet 100% of all job qualifications. That's not the case. We talked a little bit about, Marcia said about transferable skills. We all have transferable skills. And the skills that you think that you need to do the job are probably, yes, some of them, but some of them, the skills that you probably possess that you think might not be transferable, they probably are. So I would say just, look for those jobs, apply for them, and then, work your magic once you're in the door, because there's just so much opportunity here, so many different things that you can do. And we have so many different businesses.
Love that. So we've gotten this question in a few different ways. You all are obviously advocates for change. You're engaged in your BRGs. So for folks who are at maybe smaller companies or even mid-sized companies who want things like the 15-minute yoga session at lunch or, access to leadership resources, what advice do you have for folks who want to advocate for that change within their companies? Marcia, do you want to kick us off? I see you shaking your head.
Definitely, I would say that having your voice, right? Who do you have in your network that you can actually start? It starts with a simple conversation, if that's with HR. You know what? For mindfulness, there's a lot now of studies that are in place about what you need to do to be functional at work, and mindfulness, mental health, all of those things are key components. When you show up, there's so much more than just work. So I would say first, just ask. There's nothing wrong with, saying, can we implement this for our employees, for a health and wellness perspective?
Yeah, I love that. Just ask. My mom always told me you always have to ask. The worst they're going to tell you is no.
My mom told me the same thing.
Courtney or Cindy, anything else you want to add to that?
No, just be bold in your asking. I mean, feel free to ask and say, here's why we want this. And oh, by the way, there's a collective of us that had decided and think this would be a good idea. And here's some of the benefits that would be good for the company if we did do this. I think it's also important to point out to say, hey, if we have, wellness of mind, we're going to be the better of associates for the company. And don't be afraid to say, like, this is going to be better for both of us, the company and for you as an individual too.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I would just say, I would just add that, show the benefits of something like a yoga program or a 15-minute stretch exercise. And you heard it here from Fairygodboss.
Absolutely. So we are getting close to time. And want to give you all an opportunity for some closing thoughts. So before we sign off, would love to hear from each of you, what is a piece of advice or just a closing remark that you have for everyone who's joined us today? Courtney, let's start with you.
My closing advice is to be you, and to be your authentic self, and to not be afraid of being you. Sometimes I will tell people, thank you for just being you. And I mean that. And so as you progress and as you advance in your career, be yourself and be your authentic self, and don't be afraid to be yourself inside of work and outside of work as well. So that's my advice.
I love that. Marcia?
Yeah, so my advice would be build your network, because I think in my entire career has all been about my network. And also, don't be afraid to take risk. I think I waited so late in my career to learn that journey. If you're just starting out, take the risk because you have nothing to lose but to learn. So that would be my word of advice for everyone here today.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Cindy?
Well, as the veteran here, I would say continuous learning, right? Learning those new skills, staying relevant, and to steal Courtney's phrase, be bold.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think we've all really resonated with the be bold advice. And you all have shared such terrific advice and wisdom with us today. We really appreciate you making the time to chat with us and the Fairygodboss community. Like I said, we will be sending this out to participants so you can revisit it. And thank you all again for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon.
Yes. Could I just shout out the person
Yeah.
that they love this womanar? I love
Yeah.
that.
The womanar.
The womanar. Thank you for that.
I love that too.
Yes,
Thank you. This has been great.
So great. Maybe we should rebrand these as womanars. I love it.
I think so too.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Marcia, Courtney, Cindy, it was so lovely to chat with you. Again, thank you to Prudential for taking the time to be with us today. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mary.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye.